Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the cottage. Sorry, I missed a video over the weekend. Everybody was sick in the house. But we're back. And tonight, we're going to be going back to the other side of things, if you want to look at it that way, with Cody Johnston from Some More News. He used to work for Cracked, I guess. But tonight, he's going to be asking the question, why conservatives are not funny. And seemingly willfully going the long way around to not answer that question, or ignoring the really obvious answer that seems to be staring him in the face. It's gonna be fun. I think I'm gonna break this one into two parts because Cody's videos are usually pretty long, and I'm gonna take a little bit of mercy, a little bit of pity on us here. Okay. First, though, like the video if you enjoy this kind of stuff, and subscribe to the channel to see more content like this and to let the algorithm know that you want to do that. Thank you so much. And I don't know, maybe share it around. If we get 500 subscribers, I can get some merch. Let's go see what Cody's doing. Woo! You ready?
Because this question concerns everyone. It's a bit of a conundrum, something we all kind of accept, and the internet loves to write think pieces about. The stereotype being that, as it stands now, the only joke conservatives seem to have and glom onto is the old "I identify as a blank" bit. This meme and such. And it's the question we are being tasked with tonight.
Real quick, though, I want to say that he goes out of his way to define what comedy is and never seems to get around to defining what conservatism is. It's fun.
Because honestly, it shouldn't be that way. Humor isn't politically aligned, right? And to be clear, we're not talking about funny entertainers who happen to be Republicans like your Kelsey's Grammer or your David's Zucker, but rather comedy is specifically right-leaning in themes. The Jon Stewart of the right, if you will.
Again, to me, I don't know. I feel like the answer to why aren't conservatives funny is pretty obvious. But we'll get there.
And just to get it out of the way, there are a lot of shitty, left-leaning comics out there. You may even think I'm one of them. I don't know. I don't read the comments. But the late-night model alone seems to exclusively function by taking literally any comedian and sucking their funny force like some kind of hot mummy curse. But I don't think there's a question about how oddly one-sided political humor really is.
Agreed. So we're going to go ahead and skip the clips that he uses to illustrate that, because I'm going to go ahead and assume it based on the other examples that he gives, and I'm going to skip most of the clips that he uses, A, to save time, and B, because I don't want to get copyright claimed.
Objectively speaking, that was very bad comedy. That is, of course, Gutfeld and his opening jokes pointing out that several things are, in fact, named Newton.
Yeah, and also he's going to, dissect every one of the clips anyway, so we don't need to watch them.
Followed by the line, and I'm going to directly quote him here. Much like my nightly massage therapists, forces always come in pairs, as a punchline intro to this segment. And it's okay if you didn't fully understand what he said just then, because his delivery reads like someone who just learned what words are. That's definitely
or someone with dentures.
See, what Gutfeld has there is a throwaway joke meant to bridge two subjects. Something you would want to say naturally and fast that isn't hard to understand. Like when I'm thanking my two massage therapists for their hard work. He's doing a casual simile, where the twist is that what you're comparing says something absurd about yourself. An actual example of this structure would be saying something like, comedy is about tone and texture, something that, much like my weird smooth balls, Greg Gutfeld lacks.
Point taken. We're going to go ahead and skip the next ball joke as well, if we can help it.
I say something like, and also like my weird balls, Greg Gutfeld is empty inside, and so on. Look, it's not perfect, but my point is,
there has to be wordplay.
That I'm giving your brain something that's easy to digest, like my weird balls. The problem with Gutfeld's joke is that he wanted to land on the phrase, forces always come in pairs. So the natural joke writing instinct would be to take one of the words and give it a double meaning, something like, much like a Sith and apprentice, forces always come in pairs.
Yes. Okay, so that's a pun on the word forces. Yeah.
Or perhaps, much like a fruit fetishist, forces always come in pairs.
Gross. The crude sexual humor is heavy in this one. It's great, right? But we're getting to something important. I promise. Because that was a pun on the word come. Yeah? You still with me? Okay.
See? Words are neat. But Greg actually does the opposite of this, creating a simile that makes your brain have to work backwards to understand it. A massage therapist, when doing a massage, presses and rubs on muscles that a fucking alien might perhaps define as a force. He's saying his massage, or his force, comes in pairs, like his nightly massage therapists. So what he's ultimately saying is just, I get a massage from two people every night.
Which is super gross and just bougie as hell, I guess. And like, no one needs or wants to know that, do they? No. Which is part of why it's not funny. Oh, and I think that it illustrates the lack of empathy because to not know to not even consider the idea that most people don't get massages at all, much less by two people at once, much less every night. Ugh.
As his ultimate joke. And that's the ending problem, which is that the final observation being made isn't creative or absurd or funny or an observation or unexpected, but rather confusing. Why do you have two? So your brain is left searching for something it might have missed, and you find yourself repeating the joke in your mind several times to understand it.
Right, because in order to write good jokes, you have to have a certain amount of empathy for how another person might think.
Ultimately, getting disappointed at the result. I probably didn't need to break it down that much, but I wanted to.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to explain why it's fundamentally bad. Gutfeld is a fundamentally bad comedian, made worse by his weird, cruel confidence and that weird, half tone he's doing where he starts up here and then kind of eats the rest of it.
Yeah, and he's going to do some actual, granular analysis of comedy for us, which is fine. Like I say, he used to work for Crack. I'm pretty sure this guy counts as a real comedian, however you would classify that. I'm not. And I make no pretense about that. But yeah, I try to crack a joke every once in a while, and I appreciate the structure of it. It's like a different kind of poetry, right? So we're gonna go ahead and go over that because I think comedy obviously is an important barometer, social barometer, and lately there's been some hubbub there, right? There's been some pushback there. Oh, you can't joke about that.
He's doing Colbert or something? I don't know. Not to mention that this whole segment turns out to be about how he's going to buy a gun because he's scared of crime, and how we should all be scared too because the Democrats are planning to destroy the country by purposefully allowing crime.
Which would be obviously hyperbole, right? And that's the kind of thing where both sides do this though. They just want to demonize their opponents, right? So that they don't have to acknowledge when they ever have a point, and that's how you end up with the polarization, rather than anyone having a debate.
And this is probably the larger issue, which is that political comedy often works best when it's pointing out a truth of some kind. And while there are a lot of harsh truths to be said about Democrats, they aren't, purposefully trying to make crime legal.
Exactly. By just ignoring the actual stuff to make stuff up. It's almost like they don't want to win. And both sides do this. Just to throw grist into the mill and just keep it churning forever. Okay, where are we?
So it just feels like weird fear-mongering slam poetry. There's no teeth to his comedy because his message is curated propaganda from one political perspective. This isn't exclusive to the right, but any niche group pushing a political agenda. An example from the left would be something like the subreddit Toilet Paper USA, a place where people like to blow off steam about grifters like Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro.
Is that an example of the same thing? That's a subreddit, for God's sake.
I get it, believe me. But one of the things they like to do is Photoshop almost believable but fake tweets from these people, which is frustrating when there are perfectly real tweets you can actually mob.
Right. And why wouldn't you do that? When there is piles and like, they don't even bother to take something someone said out of context and twist it into something awful. Right? They just make shit up. Why, in this world, when people are on Twitter, saying random shit all the time, why would you do that?
But the reason we need to talk about this wet sack of oats is that he's apparently getting higher ratings than any other late night talk show host. And that seems like some Twilight Zone shit, right? Is our entire premise to this video wrong? Is conservative comedy actually extremely popular and good?
I don't know. I guess that would be a decent example of like confirmation bias at work, right? If someone were to look at that and believe that, just be like, oh, and conclude that, right? Be like, oh, well, okay. I guess that means that all is well and the liberals are idiots, just like I thought. No.
Or perhaps is it that Fox News in general gets higher ratings than any other news station? Not because it's the most popular, but rather because it's the only right-leaning cable source.
No, it isn't. Is One American News not on the air anymore?
So, of course, everyone right-leaning will flock to them, whereas centrist or left-leaning viewers have a larger spread of option.
Like, okay. Fox has had the highest ratings in cable for years. Years and years. Used to be they just blamed that on the fact that cable was dying in general, and Fox's Fox's viewership was all old people who weren't on the internet. Are we not doing that anymore?
But again, I would argue that all late night is toothless, pandering often to liberals. But the likes of Colbert
and old people
at least have clear jokes. Good jokes? That's extremely debatable.
Like, the idea that you necessarily get more conservative as you get old is not true. A lot of people believe the same things that they believed when they were young, and a lot of them are basically liberal ideas. Okay, we're talking baby boomers now. But, like, he talks at some point about the Overton window moving with time, and, like, what was once a revolutionary idea eventually becomes common knowledge, right? And, the baby boomers and media, and mainstream media in general, are suffering from more than a little of that, aren't they? Yeah.
But this is how low we're making the bar in this episode. We're not judging the quality of jokes, just that they're able to competently make them.
Okay.
Anyway, since the internet exists and cable in general is dying, Fox is seeing a historic dip in ratings because of the fragmented way in which people get their news.
It's hit them now too, huh?
Liberals have
Way to bury the lead there, Cody.
Now, you see. And so, yeah, Gutfeld is watched more than other late-night comedians because he's the only late-night comedian that appeals to conservatives. And if conservatives had a funnier option, I'm sure they would jump on that. Sorry, Greg, but it is obviously true. And here's the thing. They actually do. And by the end of this video...
Okay. He's going to confuse, like, blue-collar with conservative, which is interesting because working-class people have historically been like, oh, I don't know, union members and stuff. But we'll get to that.
And whatnot. So this would be the more centrist take, which is that both liberals and conservatives are humorless when it comes to jabs at their own beliefs. There are multiple psychological studies claiming that conservatives don't have a sense of humor. And truth be told, I didn't look into those studies because I just don't think that that's true.
What? That's some real good newsing there, Cody. Okay. I've looked at studies like this before, and it comes down to conservative versus liberal being more of like a temperamental thing. Liberal people are more open to new experiences and change, and they tend to be more creative and more future-oriented and da-da-da-da, And conservatives tend to be, well, kind of the opposite of that. They tend to be more regimented, more rigid, more, grounded in structure and all that kind of thing. It's literally a temperamental thing. It's not a political thing. It manifests that way. It can manifest that way. But I guess he wouldn't know because he didn't look into the studies. Oh, man.
Call it faith, I guess. But I think everyone has a sense of humor. Even
I don't know that that's true. I really don't know that that's. Is that true? Is that true? I don't know. I think as we shall see ad nauseum, that some people's sense of humor is like, I don't know, underdeveloped and only like half there.
ghosts and spiders. The more nuanced phrasing of this comes from the Washington Post, referring to Sigmund Freud's wit and its relation to the unconscious, which pointed out that a joke is only as good as a third party's willingness to accept a joke. And like, I don't know, that guy cigars or whatever, but what he's saying is that even the funniest joke falls flat with the wrong audience.
And that is part of the equation, I think. Right? That's part of what's going on. If you're trying to make someone laugh and they do not want to laugh with you, they're not going to. Come on.
But the truth is, that equation is backward. And what I mean is that it should be that even the funniest joke falls flat when it's told by someone who has bad intentions.
What? What? I'm really not sure what he means by that. I think that a joke falls flat when it's based on something that isn't true, because then it doesn't make sense, because a joke is like a bit of truth stretched around an idea. And if it isn't true, then it breaks. Like an overstretched rubber band and pokes you in the eye.
And they've canceled people that are more powerful than me. Canceled J.K. Rowling. My God, J.K. Rowling wrote all the Harry Potter books by herself.
Again, I'm not sure if that's a joke or not. And I don't think the audience is either. But like, I'm going to go ahead and leave Chappelle in because A, I've already included this clip in a different video, and B, he's really what we're talking about here, isn't he?
She sold so many books, the Bible worries about her.
That's actually kind of, that's funny. But it's actually kind of interesting how he poses the question, why is conservative comedy not good? And then, throws Dave Chappelle in here. What are we? 12 and a half, almost 13 minutes in a video about conservative comedy. He does explicitly say once that Chappelle is not a conservative. I'm like, duh. Why is he here?
And they canceled her because she said in an interview, and this is not exactly what she said, but effectually she said, gender was a fact. I'm Team Turf. I agree.
Famous last words.
Gender is a fact.
First of all, he's conflating gender with sex.
Thank you, Cody. What a very sharp point. One I made myself in my other video featuring this footage, which I guess I will link below. It was the big one for the channel. If you like this, you'll like it too. What did he say?
Gender is
Oh yeah, right. Conflating gender with
First of
sex.
all, he's conflating gender with sex.
Yeah, which is a really good point and a very frustrating one, because like you can literally just sit and watch them oscillate back and forth between the two things. Because right here, we've distinguished gender from sex, right? Now let's give him like what, one sentence, two sentences?
Gender is a social construct. We made it up, like money or a round earth. But even if he said sex is a fact, at around 5 weeks, a fetus forms a cluster of cells that can either turn into weird smooth testicles or weird smooth ovaries.
Okay, I've lost track of the sentences.
And it's a gene called SRY that activates the former of the two. But that gene isn't a binary on and off function, but rather a sliding scale that can and will sometimes cause a person to be born with neither female or male genitalia.
First of all, Your genitals don't really determine your sex, right? And secondly, or the appearance of your genitals does not determine your sex. And secondly, I thought the sex and gender were different, so why are we talking about this?
Doctors will often choose a gender to go with, but we later learned that this choice could result in the child growing up with a different gender identity.
Yeah, because they picked wrong. They were mistaken.
Than what was given to them at birth.
But that's not the gender identity they were given at birth, is it? Because that would be the sex that they were given at birth. Because sex and gender are different. You just said that. And as far as the SRY gene being a sliding scale, like the SRY gene is on the Y chromosome. Okay, so chances are really, really, really super good that I don't have one. You either have one or you don't. Oops, a binary.
Meanwhile, other genes like DMRT1 and FOXL2 will maintain gender characteristics later in life,
but gender and sex are different, right? So who cares?
Stop functioning. On top of this, the brain itself has no binary gender. There's no male brain or female brain.
Okay, then what are we talking about? What the fuck is trans? A spiritual essence? Like what? That you somehow magically got encoded with the wrong social programming? How and why? What is the mechanism for this thing? You know, and if the brain is irrelevant, then can we stop talking about it?
The point I'm making here is that no, gender is not a fact. It's actually quite slippery according to real science.
You just tried to argue that reproductive sex was a slippery thing, which it isn't. But that's what you were trying to argue after just saying that sex is one thing and gender is a social construct. Y'all see how fast he did that?
I'm not going to get into all the details, nor do I want to get into this too much, because Dave Chappelle, for starters, isn't a conservative. But he is an objectively successful and subjectively extremely hilarious comedian with very incorrect opinions on transgender people.
Can you have an incorrect opinion? I mean, you can have a stupid opinion that is belligerently against all the evidence. But like, I don't know. I was always taught that opinions and facts are different things. Right? You can get a fact right or you can get a fact wrong. You can have opinions about those facts. You can decide to disregard them in your personal estimation of things, right? But you don't argue opinions with people because that argument will go on forever, or because no one will ever be able to prove anyone right or wrong. As opposed to facts, which are different. And I think that distinction is important.
He claims in this special that he has no problem with the trans community, and I'm sure he believes that, even though he won't shut the f*** up about them. I bring all this up because his Netflix special is currently the subject of both protests and counter-protests.
Won't shut the fuck up about them. Wow, okay. So these people will harass you. Sometimes just to the end of your rope, right? And then complain that you're obsessed with them because you keep talking about how they're harassing you.
The counter-protesters' view very much being, you just can't take a joke. There's a narrative here that Dave Chappelle makes fun of everyone. So why is it that only trans people get offended? Are they just humorless? See, the problem is that framing this about humor actually deflects from the problem. And to put it into perspective, imagine if a comedian was going around making jokes about how being gay is a choice. It wouldn't matter if the jokes they were making were funny, because the premise they're selling would be fundamentally harmful and wrong.
Okay. I don't think that anyone who doesn't already believe that would think those jokes were funny, because they wouldn't make any sense. Right? If you base your jokes on a premise that isn't true, like I say, the joke is not going to hold together. And thus not be funny. But like, oh boy.
Chappelle claims he has no problem with trans people, but is saying things that are factually wrong and designed to discredit them.
Also, I don't think I've ever heard a comedian say a thing that I disagreed with and then all of a sudden just gone, well, maybe. Like, yeah, okay, no. What are they, preachers?
It's propaganda, no different than Gutfeld saying that Democrats want crime to happen. The only contrast being that Dave Chappelle is actually funny.
What? So you complain about him conflating gender and sex and then turn around and do the exact same thing. As opposed to Gutfeld, who can't even, like, make a pun. Wow, like, that's an insult to Dave Chappelle. A pretty bad one, I think.
So it's not that trans people can't take a joke, and in fact, there are tons of examples of trans comedians in stuff like roast battles clearly taking jokes. It's that these specific jokes are framed as hard truths that are actually based on weird lies used to justify marginalizing an already marginalized and vulnerable group of people.
Okay, hard truths are actually lies. Right? Got that? Hold that one.
Lies that have been repeated as jokes over and over again by conservatives.
Okay, so are they framed as hard truths or are they framed as jokes? Because I thought the framing of them as the hard truth was the slick part. Cody, he really talks a lot. And I used to enjoy this show a lot more a couple of years ago. Go figure. I don't know. It's really starting, like, the older I get, maybe, the more his presentation wears on me. And I'm starting to think that just so many words and the puppets and the goofy skits and shit are, like, I don't know, kind of just a distraction from the fact that he's doubling back and talking over himself. Now here's a little more confusion about whether or not these are truth bombs or jokes.
The appeal of someone like Chappelle is that he tells it like it is. That's a whole genre of comedy where the points being made can almost intersect with philosophical truths or political truths, and there are cathartic moments where the comic doesn't even really make a joke so much as say something profound. See Carlin, George.
They keep bringing up George Carlin, who's the only person that you can even begin to compare Dave Chappelle to, I guess. He's the only person, living or dead, who people seem to think is in the same league as Dave Chappelle. I hadn't thought about it like that. I'm not going to comment on whether I think those two men are of equal comedic stature, whatever. But I love the implication. They invoke him like they think he would agree with them because he's not available to stand up and agree with Dave Chappelle.
The problem is that this is a very hard thing to do and will go very wrong if the person is, say, incredibly wrong about stuff.
Right. The joke's not going to hold up if it's not true.
In case, for some reason, you forgot, we're talking about conservative humor and why it doesn't work. Specifically, the excuse that liberals simply don't find their humor funny because we're triggered or offended or whatever. And while I can't speak for everyone, the actual truth there is that, much like Dennis Miller's zinger about toenail cream not helping a centipede get relief so it shoots itself in the feet, like progressives, the conservative jokes about liberals and Dems aren't really offensive, but rather so confusing or inconsistent that they just don't actually touch a nerve.
Or like in the case of that Gutfeld guy, it's just like the pun is bad. It's a poor quality play on words. Poor quality wordplay. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do. Right? But like I say, it shows a lack of creativity and a lack of empathy. And so far, his answer to why conservative comedy isn't good is because it's bad. That seems overly simplistic. Surely he's leading us somewhere with this, but like, man, it's over 20 minutes in already. Come on, Cody.
Tweet the Babylon Bee. You thought I didn't see you over there, but I did. See, the joke that they continue in the bit is that Biden is so militaristically pro-trans and therefore bombing anyone who isn't. The problem is that while Biden has reversed a lot of Trump's shitty policies surrounding the LGBTQ community, he actually hasn't done too much else besides that. And so if...
Oh, God. Really? Really? Do I have to go and look up that goddamn executive order again? The one from his first fucking day in office. Making sure that gender identity is a part of all the protected categories now, when, femaleness still isn't. So yeah, that's fun. I could go on. But like basically, they did away with all sex-based protections on their first day. And when I say they, I don't know. I used to live with a guy about Biden's age. So maybe it's just that he reminds me of him, but I just have difficulty believing that 80-year-old man is in charge of everything. I'm not going to say he doesn't do anything, but he is not in charge of everything. There is just no way.
If you were to make fun of Biden, perhaps you could mock him for presenting as an ally while not putting his money where his mouth is. That's the reality. The actual criticism that would likely bother Biden supporters. Or, slapping on a BLM sticker to a drone that's killing brown people overseas.
Which, hello, he was Obama's vice president. I don't think he has any problem with that.
But by framing it as this pretend world where Biden is a pro-trans fascist only appeals to the far-right fantasy version of politics.
Or, people who mistake the administration's actions for his personal actions.
And that's fine. Their audience is conservatives and not liberals, after all. But what I'm honing in on here is whether these jokes would somehow offend liberals so that they don't find it funny. But it's just not funny? I don't know how else to describe it. It's not a very funny observation. In part because it's one they tell so many times. Hey, did you know the army is woke now?
That is weird, right? I am not conservative, and I was raised by geeks. Okay. They were not pro-military. Not at all. The world that I grew up in, it was pretty much taken for granted that it was nothing but a government meat grinder. Okay, I want to make that perfectly clear. I'm not trying to say that, the military is this amazing institution, but it's very strange that they're like the essence of conservative. And here in Tennessee, conservatism is rife, rampant, and it's the volunteer state, for God's sake. I think they have more people who've served, more soldiers under tombstones than just about anywhere else.
That's it. That's what the joke is. Not that the
It's
army
not funny.
is
It's definitely weird.
Or perpetuating, war stuff, but rather...
Right, it's not funny, but it's definitely weird, right?
That the army is now the bad thing. Wokeness. I guess the framing is technically different, but the punchline is always the same. On top of that, and this is pretty key, I just don't believe they actually care about drone strikes. What I mean is that when you look at a site like The Onion and search the word drone, you'll see satire pointing out the ghoulishness of drones under every president. Whereas the Babylon Bee only started caring about drone strikes conveniently right as Biden took office.
All right, so that comedy isn't funny because, again, it's not true, right? It doesn't ring true. Comedy has to have the ring of truth, or it isn't funny.
You can search their site and see that the only time they mention Trump and military drones is back when he was running for office. Then they dropped the subject completely during his loser term.
Is this conservatism, though? It's obviously corruption. And, it might qualify as right-wing. But, there's only a certain flavor of conservative. Conservative and right-wing are not the same thing. Like Nazis were right-wing, right? And you wouldn't necessarily, just because someone is in favor of, I don't know, is big on the nuclear family and marriage or something for religious reasons or something, does not make them a Nazi, right?
In other words, the Bee sure seems disingenuously concerned about drones in order to roast Biden, and perhaps, interestingly, specifically trans people. Whereas The Onion is taking a hard moral stance despite who is president. And so going back to why the bee is less funny.
Right, but like, so isn't that sad that the freaking satirical news, I don't know, I guess that's what satire is for, right? Ideally, maybe they're doing their job and no one else is.
It's at least in part because we all sort of know they're pulling their punches for the GOP while grotesquely demonizing the left. They have a transparent agenda and are clearly angry at Democrats.
How many different ways can you say that the joke doesn't work because it's not true? How many different ways can we say that, Cody? Let's find out. Apparently, this is an experiment to find out the answer to that question. How many licks to get to the center of this bullshit, huh? What was that last thing?
The left. They have a transparent agenda and are clearly angry at Democrats, often to the point that they forget to put satire first.
Right. Okay. As opposed to these liberals who are so not angry with Dave Chappelle. Right? He didn't make them angry. And that's to the point where they forgot to even make an argument. Right?
For example, they have scores of articles mocking AOC for being childishly dumb. But that doesn't make any sense. What controversy there is around AOC has nothing to do with her intelligence. Voting present was a bit of a cowardly political move, as AOC herself has pointed out about others and herself. Maybe there's like a joke there, instead of her not knowing basic words.
So that's them going back, us going back to the point of why would you just make shit up when real life has plenty of material? Why? I assume that has something to do with the corruption, but
They're just calling her dumb because they don't like her, I guess, which is not very funny or offensive or
they're not interested in commenting on cultural topics. They just want to do hit pieces. Maybe.
Edgy because there's no actual nerve it's hitting. But according to the editor-in-chief of The Bee, what I just said is actually the joke. In an interview with The Atlantic, he describes their AOC is stupid articles as an Andy Kaufman-esque self-parody making fun of themselves. He calls it one of their best jokes because so many on leftist Twitter complain that the joke isn't funny. Not because it's offensive, but just because it's not funny. And that's the joke? A joke that he has to explain because literally no one got it.
But see, again, it's like missing that second level. You know, like they made the play on words, but it's not, it doesn't say anything. Or what it does say is, hits you wrong. Right? The lacking of the empathy to craft a good joke.
So, first of all, I guess congratulations that you think your best joke is making fun of how your jokes are bad. But also, there's no real way to tell that it's a parody because, and this is pretty key, it's not any different from other Babylon Bee articles. When they wanted to tackle the subject of, say, Kamala Harris and immigration, they frame it as Kamala Harris hoping her unlikability will distract from her terrible job fixing the border. The joke being that she sucks and is not fixing the border. Was this also an Andy Kaufman self-parody?
Oh,
just how many of their articles are avant-garde Banksy subversions of themselves?
How dare you compare Banksy to Andy Kaufman?
Meanwhile, The Onion tackled the same idea with Kamala Harris deeply troubled by images of Haitian migrants at border whom she distinctly remembers telling not to come here. And do you see the difference? One is just, she sucks, and more importantly, we don't like her. And the other actually points out that she's a hypocrite.
Right. One of them is just a hit piece, and the other one actually says something about not just her, but by extension, the system that she functions in and has gotten so high in, right? Mm-hmm. So there's attacking people, and then there's critiquing systems in society. And that would definitely be a big difference. It's a second level that just isn't there.
I definitely don't want to sit here and just read headlines like I'm Jay Leno or something, so I'll stop there. My point being that there are two angles here. one coming from blunt force dislike, while the other is a way more nuanced criticism. And then apparently they will sometimes parody their own blunt force dislike without telling us, I guess. And so the intent behind a lot of Babylon Bee jokes are already extremely confusing. And it's hard to find something funny if you fundamentally don't understand the intent of it.
Now, I think we do understand the intent of it, right? The intent is pretty obvious, and it's evidenced by the lack of that second level, or if it's there, it's underdeveloped. You know, it's not sharp. Not sharp. Because it's lacking empathy, and like communicating ideas about society is not its goal. It's not confusing. It's a lie.
Because it's being hidden from you. This also suspiciously
Badly
protects the bee from having to admit they aren't funny, because they can hide behind this agent of chaos excuse.
Okay, I think that's pretty good observation. Actually, it's Schrodinger's joke, right?
Where they're so funny that they aren't funny, or something like that. But going all the way back to what that cigar f***er said about the audience being a key factor, any and all meta jokes are routinely lost on their core audience of conservatives. I'm going to show you one of their sketches, and
no, we're not going to watch that, because again, I'm going to be cutting out most of the clips for time and for copyright claim. But what was that? Come on.
Routinely lost on their core audience of conservatives.
I don't think that they're lost. I think that they just disagree with the subtext. And they're reactionaries. Okay? Because they're not interested in changing anything. And they are angry that anyone is suggesting that it needs to be done.
But there's an easier answer here.
Oh, please, please, tell us, Cody, what is it?
Going back to the fact that conservative humor is often met with a level of confusion from liberals about what exactly the joke is. And perhaps right now, a Babylon Bee writer or some conservative is watching my confusion and laughing at it. Because what Andy Kaufman was, his specific brand, would now be called trolling.
And I think that's why people remember him. What a thing to have invented.
Kaufman would do things like wrestle women to show how weak they are, the punchline being that he was doing an act to get a reaction from audiences.
But what was that reaction? What does it say? Okay, this is a really good example. I don't think Andy Kaufman's funny because he doesn't fucking say anything with his comedy. And like half the time people weren't sure if he was joking or not. Which like was the joke, supposedly, but what does that say? Is he making some kind of statement about, lack of communication, lack of interpersonal communication in modern society? Like what? I don't know. He really just kind of looks like he just wanted to act like a dick and get a rise out of people without even bothering to come up with a pretense as to why.
Joke was that people were offended. That's the core idea behind trolling.
Sadism.
Which is really just another word for like a prank. You want the reaction. A notable successful troll would be people like Ken M or Daniel from SL.
I don't know who these people are.
Who prey on small circles on the internet, acting oblivious and frustrating so that we, the actual audience, can laugh at the exchanges.
Just people being frustrated?
Right? A more mainstream version is the fellows, or chaps, at Jackass, honking air horns at cracker-ass golfers trying to make their putts or swings or whatever golfers do. I didn't look into it. Something about flags. But in all of those cases, the trolls have two things in common. The people they're pranking are a small niche group, and they inherently have a good sense of comedy in what they do.
Okay. That's like punching up, I guess, right? I don't know. I don't care. It took me so long to figure out why some people thought that just fucking with somebody and to upset them was funny. Sadism.
So, what's really the punchline or observation here? I will answer that, actually. The punchline
really?
Is all the people who would then share this on Twitter and say, what the f*** is this? The punchline is me, right now, asking what the punchline is. It's that I am reacting to it.
Mhm.
Conservative comedians have become obsessed with getting a reaction from the left to the point that they've completely forgotten to say an actual joke.
Again, are we still talking about Dave Chappelle? Is he a conservative? Do you really think that's why he said what he said? Was just to get a reaction out of people because he doesn't need the publicity. And he's never courted publicity, lest we forget. He walked away from his television show and it was the highest rated show on TV. I know that was a while ago, but that demonstrates like not everyone would do that, would they? No. Oh gosh, okay.
They do something pointless, often cruel or weird or factually wrong, and laugh when people point out that it's pointless or cruel or weird or factually wrong. And so this idea that wit is based on the third party's willingness to accept a joke has actually become more meta than that.
Right, but I think part of that relies on the idea that it is a fully formed joke and not just fucking with someone to fuck with someone because you think fucking with people is funny.
It's a comedian saying unfunny things to an audience, and then a second audience watching that first audience not laugh and finding that funny.
Yeah, so they are imagining someone else's offended reaction and getting amusement from an imagined offense.
Or in
Kinda
other
twisted.
words,
Whoop. No clips. No clips. Very few clips.
joke there is, look at this mean or incorrect thing I just said. Boy, that's gonna make people mad. And the insatiable lust for this end result, to have the media outraged over you, has really thrown off a lot of conservatives' ability to tell an actual joke. Because again, if the end result is to make liberals react or go, that's not funny, the easiest way to do that is to not be funny. And so it creates a built-in excuse for any time someone points that out.
Again, I do think that that's legitimate. Schrodinger's joke. Someone floats, something in kind of a jokey manner to see how other people will react. And if they react negatively, they're like, whoa, calm down, it was just a joke. And if they laugh with you, well, then you know who you're with. But, he's like, look at this mean, incorrect thing that I just said. I don't know. I think a lot of times these people think they said a mean, incorrect thing. They consider themselves to be dropping truth bombs, okay? Neglecting to take into account how other people are going to feel about it and the fact that you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. If you approach people offending them on purpose and then you're surprised when they don't want to hang out with you and they don't want to listen to what you have to say, I mean, you're an idiot.
The Babylon Bee can comfortably lean back on the idea that they're comedy geniuses playing 4D chess because no one understood their super good joke.
Come on, that's one of the oldest tricks in the book. People think I'm a jerk. Well, they just don't understand me.
About how doctors prescribe water to horses. Even if the political point they're trying to make is clear, the language and context and attempt is just, whoo boy, not great. Often it all collapses in on itself, where the left will laugh at how ridiculous an attempt it is, and that reaction will be seen as a success.
Because basically, if a sadist is poking you, no matter how you reacted, so they won.
Garrison comes to mind.
Okay, I don't know who that is. We're not going to do that. We're going to skip ahead to one more weird conservative self-own and a couple of interesting questions, and then we're going to be cutting it off for this half. But don't worry, I'll be back in a couple of days with the second half. So let's see what we got.
Spoofers. That's a cartoon released by the Daily Wire, claiming at the end there that until the white folk came around to America, Native Americans only had dream catchers, tomahawks, and cannibalism. And
that's embarrassing. What decade is it? Wow, guys.
Then we showed up and gave them all the other stuff, like medicine, breath.
Although that does kind of sound like the whole other cultures had more than two sexes before the white man came and showed them how reproduction works. Like, what?
And plumbing, which are actually all things they already had a version of, but whatever. Oh, and one of the things they list is American football, which hilariously was invented by the Iroquois. Anywho. Also, a whole section about the cultivation of corn, of all things. But anywho, again, the point is that the video is clearly mocking Indigenous Peoples Day and trying, wrongly, to credit Europeans with advancing America. It's just what the video is about. And yet, when the media correctly pointed out how racist and uneducated the video was, our pal Ben Shapiro claimed that it was just satire, while also pulling the video from the site. But what does that mean?
Like, he's about to explain what satire is. It's exaggerating something to, illustrate a foible of your opponents, right? And again, he never does really tell us what exactly he means by conservative, and kind of wiggles around with how he uses that word. So far, I think we've talked about political affiliation and temperamental makeup, right? But like Ben Shapiro, you'd think someone who is Jewish would have a better appreciation of what, minority groups go through. Weird.
Once again, satire is the act of using exaggerations or irony to make a point. And this video isn't an exaggeration of leftist ideas. It's a straightforward video claiming that Europeans were the ones who actually invented civilization and made corn or some shit. So what's the satire of it, then? The only answer is that it would be a satire of conservative views of Thanksgiving and Columbus Day, but on a conservative website.
That is odd. Right? That is very odd. I mean, I suppose it could be their version of what some dumb liberals would think they think. But that seems like a lot of trouble to go to for something like that, even for them. And the fact that he immediately pulled it from the website tells me that, well, we'll let Cody explain it.
A conservative website, its writers and editors all talk seriously about the glory of white Europeans civilizing the savages. So, like, they know their opinions are dog shit?
But, like, as if liberals never say anything about that, as we mentioned a minute ago.
You see how this gets so confusing and muddled. And the obvious answer is that they totally earnestly meant to make that video racist and had to backtrack. Side note, Ben said he didn't know it went up and was on vacation at the time, despite the amount of time that goes into a cartoon and scheduling that goes into publishing a Columbus Day video on Columbus Day.
Lots of people work at, companies like that. Maybe no one ran it past him. Because again, you'd think someone who's Jewish would have some appreciation for what a group of white people on the rampage can do.
Also, in his attempted explanation about the satire being a response to the left turning Columbus Day solely into a story about Western civilization genociding Native Americans, he put...
I mean, is it solely about that? It's also about, I don't know, I guess, international seafaring navigation failures?
Genociding, in quotes. So, maybe there's something there?
Like, I hate to harp on this point, but Ben Shapiro is supposedly Jewish. And he and his goofy sister, she talks about it a lot more than he does, I think. But, like, doggone it. Really? I don't know. You'd think that they would have some cultural appreciation for what a genocide is, and how that's a serious thing. Yeah, not something for scare quotes. Not something for sarcasm. But, like, if we're anti-Ben Shapiro, does that make us anti-Semites? Oh my goodness. I mean, gender critical people are being called anti-Semites for questioning any of the funding or any of the, just massive amounts of resources that are being poured into gender ideology stuff, gender clinics and whatever. But we're anti-Semites for talking about that because a lot of the people behind it are Jewish, apparently. Who the hell knew? I didn't until they brought it up. So if we're going to sit here and criticize Ben Shapiro, does that make Cody an anti-Semite? I mean, I guess that would make me one too, because I'm definitely not a fan of Ben Shapiro. We all know he's a total wonk, right? But I mean, are we not allowed to criticize him because he's a Jew? Oh my gosh, Cody, what are you doing? Be careful.
About the beliefs going on there? Anyway, it's like whenever people would say Trump was being sarcastic or trolling when he said completely serious and ghoulish things. But the things they would say he's trolling about often aligned with all of his other beliefs.
I guess maybe they thought that he was joking because they found it funny. That's an easy mistake to make, I guess. Because if you think that sadism is funny, then yeah, I'm sure Trump was pretty hilarious.
So, like, what was his entire presidency ironic? Was he the Andy Kaufman of elected officials? Or once
You know, there might be an argument to be made for that anyway.
again, is this idea of satire or trolling a really convenient way to deflect literally any and all criticism? I feel like it's that second thing and not the Andy Kaufman thing.
I feel like maybe they want to tell themselves the one and it is actually functionally the other. Like, I'll give Cody that one. I'll give him that one. He's not completely talking nonsense. Because again, if somebody is completely talking nonsense, then you just blow them off immediately. You're like, oh, well, that person's full of shit. And you don't listen to anything that they have to say. Both the neoliberals and like it's fascist to the left of me, fascist to the right. And here we are stuck in the middle with biological sex and common sense. Because this is how they control the information. They mix in the bullshit with a bunch of stuff that either is true or sounds like it's totally true in the context, and if you don't go look it up.
So there you have it. I successfully explained not much yet, actually. Suck a ball. We still haven't figured out why conservatives aren't funny, have we?
Conservatives aren't funny because comedy is necessarily like talking about bringing up taboo subjects out into the open and taking risks and pushing boundaries, and conservatives fucking hate that. Okay, the only thing that they know how to use it for is retaliation against that sort of thing. That's why they're not funny, because it's reactionary and it's often angry and sadistic. So it lacks that second level, the tier, the communication tier. Okay, or if it does, it just communicates the I hate you, I'm mad, stop that kind of message. Okay, it doesn't actually speak to anything other than that person's anger over whatever. And I want to say that the people who are reacting to Dave Chappelle are doing pretty much exactly the same thing. They're behaving like reactionaries, like conservatives, like authoritarians. But we're going to leave it there for now. That's about halfway. We're going to come back with Cody in a couple of days. Thank you so much for sticking with me because we're already at an hour. Mwah. Come back to the cottage next time for the grand conclusion of some more comedy with Cody Johnston. And why aren't conservatives funny? Even though I just answered that. But there's so much more fun to be had. I promise. Like the video if you enjoyed this. Subscribe to the channel for more stuff like this. Whew, and I'm going to go record the other half of this. See you soon.